In this episode I want to go along shortly one complete shooting for an 360 degree by 180 degree. So this means finally that we get on the end an image that wraps the horizontal line one time around a sphere. That would be here this line, and then in the background further. That's 360 degree finally one time around. And when I have here these axes from a sphere, the vertical one, then I go from here to here, and this exactly measures then 180 degrees. And the 180 degrees is exactly this measurement, and the 360 is then this measurement. The standard convention for this is a format 1 to 2. That means the horizontal dimension is twice in length than the vertical dimension from this picture. And that wraps normally nicely around a sphere in Cinema 4D. So what we need for that is of course a lens that can capture something like that, which is not available, not at once. There's always something in the way, because there's the lens, for example, which can't go around itself. So when I take a look from the top view, I could say we can have a fisheye which has 180 degree view angle, and then I take another one 180 degree view angle, and some people even suggest exactly this. The problem with fisheyes are normally a little bit more difficult. First of all, you need exactly then this point here. Just to go a little bit to this or to this direction with one or the other shooting direction results here in a gap in the worst case. And there's something else with fisheyes. When you have that fisheye picture, and I show you soon something, we have a high resolution for the area here in the middle, and the more we go then to the border here, the more details we have with the same amount of pixels, because it's just an image. So we have, when we take real measurements from the reality, then we have here small details, and the same detail would show up in this way, much bigger. So we have maybe in this middle field here, just from the top, a lot of sufficient material, but to these areas here we don't. So my shooting is normally, and I use it quite often, that I use 180 degrees here, then, and I make this a little bit bigger so you can see this, I take just a third apart, and then I shoot here one time in this direction around, and then I make this as well a little bit bigger so you can see what's finally happened, or maybe I can paint this here in the middle. So I have now 3 of them, there and there. That means we have overlapping areas here, here, and then here. I have painted that a little bit out of angles here. This is 90 degrees, but 120 degree is normally exactly the distance between. And so we have overlapping areas exactly where we have the least amount of pixels, except for the pole caps, exactly here. But to be honest, we have normally our tripod exactly in one of these spots, so we need to shoot there or we fix it later. And here we have mostly the sky, where we have, in the worst case, then same problem as here, a tiny little spot. And we can fix this, of course, in body paint, for example. Just put this map on a sphere, wrap it around in spherical mode, and then just use your stamp tool and paint this in real values, because this is now distorted when we have this as an image. When we map this on a sphere, it's undistorted and you can paint very nicely. There's another way to do this, but it takes a little bit more time and is maybe not so intuitive, but I use this as well quite often. I show you that. Okay, Then we have to talk a little bit about the nodal point, and for that I have created just a little Cinema 4D scene, because when we have these 1, 2, 3 shots, this point here in the middle is not the camera body middle point. This axis here, oops, this axis here is the axis from the lens, and when I paint here maybe just a little camera body very fast so we don't lose too much time, and this would be here my lens, looks a little bit outside here, then this nodal point is mostly somewhere here in the middle. You have to check this, and for fisheye it's even sometimes a little bit more complicated, but I give you here the short introduction because we have on the university soon also a panorama series where I go more into detail all about this. So let's talk first about the nodal point here. I have here a camera body with a little LCD screen or whatever, and the typical broomstick scenery. I think I have posted something like this many years ago. I think the first time I did this in Cinema 4D as a quick example is now 8 years ago or so. Time is running. Anyway, what we want to have is of course that we know where the light goes into the lens, and this nodal point from the lens, some like to say also the non-parallax point from the lens, this is very critical to find. And if you don't find this, then the overlapping areas from the images, from the 3 fisheye images for example here, wouldn't fit on top of each other. And I'll show you what I have in mind with that. First of all, we need to switch on the camera, and then I have here a movement, and I show you that also in the top view. I go back here and I go back to this camera here, to my default camera, make that a little bit smaller. So I have animated here the camera, so we have constantly the same movement here. And the idea is that the camera moves, so we have basically these frustum, as it is called, and I show you that from the top. This is the angle of view or the focal length, and we want to have of course a movement that goes not completely on the border where we could have then the next. We need an overlapping area, and it should be 1/3 maximum, maybe less, depends on your camera, depends on the lens, depends on the application that you use. And I wouldn't go too short on that, because sometimes it's very useful to have a little bit overlapping. And as we have seen with the fisheye, when we use 3 shots, normally 180 degrees, then we have a lot of overlapping there. So when we take a look here, this lens is at the moment exactly on the nodal point. And when I move this here, then something that is closer to the lens should move in the picture exactly like the one that is a little bit further away. Normally 2 broomsticks or just a chair and a window in the wall can help here. Something that lines up. And again, I go here to the camera and I move this camera to one side and then to the other side. And you can see these 2 sticks here line up perfectly. When I go now here to the camera and change the z-axis, then you can see here already we move these sticks apart. That is not visible when we stay here exactly in the middle point. Then we can move this here fairly around, and you see only here on the top and on the lower part that there is some movement. So that's not really the way it should be in terms of adjustment, because this gives you no further information. You have to move the camera as far as possible to see finally what you have here. And here I have a 24mm lens. Let's say we have a 16mm, and then I can see here my sticks again, and I have enough overlapping here. So now they are not on top of each other, and you see in the middle they go together, and then to the other side we have the same problem. So when we shoot now one picture from this direction, the yellow is on the right. Now have a look. When I go to the other side and I want to overlap these, the yellow is now on the left. If you try to stitch these images on top of each other, you will have no luck, because there is something going on that will not really work. And so in the moment you find that nodal point, it means you have a tripod with an option to move the camera back and forth to find finally the point where the lens is exactly on that point. And that is here in this case pretty easy, because at 0 I have set this up, and now I can move it and everything works fine. And when you have something exactly here on the axis and you move it to the side and it looks a little bit out of that, like here, then you can move directly it in one or the other direction, and you see already when it becomes smaller. And when it goes over the top, like here, then you are too far. That's the first sign. So, and I suggest always to use exactly the rotation that you later want to have in your stitching. Because, for example, the standard is that the nodal point is always in one point in the lens. Some people even show you that there might be two in a lens. I haven't seen that so far, but I have read it. What I have experienced is that the fisheye lens with this very specific construction has a nodal point that moves the more you go to the side. And so when you have maybe 120 degree N rotation, then move the camera one time to 60, one time to -60, and see if these sticks here or whatever you have in a scene works together nicely. So when we have this here at 0, again it works, and that's the whole thing. For a fisheye, for example, or for one time around a panorama, if you need to shoot several rows for a panorama, then you have to do this also up and down. So the camera finds this as well here, which fits mostly. This is a short introduction to the lens nodal point or the non-parallax point. It's always here somewhere, and based on the lens construction that can vary widely. The fisheye from Sigma, the 8mm, has a gold stripe here, and that works nicely. But again, fisheyes special, have an eye on that, don't trust anything. So this nodal point here from that lens is exactly here, and that needs then to be on the rotation point. So when the camera rotates here, that's wrong. There must be something that goes then from the camera underneath of the lens and then exactly there. I show you how I do this. And in this picture we can see one of my tripods that I use for this, and this is one of my pano heads, as I call them. I have another one that is then for a completely different purpose. This one here is more or less for my fisheye, and I show you that here. Sorry for the quality, but I have used here a point and shoot very quick, and I had to speed up. You can see here roughly the gold ring of that fisheye, and then you can see here in hand grip where I have the camera, so I can balance this again if I need maybe to look up in the sky more when I'm more interested in that or whatever, but normally I have it just straight. And then I have here a little thing from Manfrotto that's normally for macro photography, to move the camera back and forth instead of changing the focus. And that gives me the option to fine-tune here exactly this option. I turn then this little knob, and that moves the camera back and forth, and I get my nodal point or my non-parallax point. And then underneath here I have just a little thing from NovoFlex. I have decrease here, and so I can rotate the whole thing very precisely. There are many options on the market, even with stuff that gives you a very nice point to just trigger that 120 degree, click, 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 and it's done. I use so many different ways to do that I'm just happy with this guy here. And then, before I forgot this one here is my promote control, and I can program this. I can trigger in what I want to have. That means if I want to have maybe 15 shots and everything half exposure value apart, then I can dial this in. And these guys are so nice. I think 3 or 4 years ago I asked them, is it possible that I can have an HDRI time-lapse mode? 3 months later there was an update and it was available. Fantastic. It's not really something that you just buy by accident. It's, I think, $300 or so was it, but I use it so often, and to dial in everything by hand, not really my taste. So if you want to have a lot of different exposures again and again, this is the way to do. And of course for time-lapse. And it has many more options, but that's not the theme here. So I go here out of that. I show you that little guy here. Here's a little monitor where you can dial in and all these options. And yeah, it's not more visible here. And of course the camera itself has a fisheye here, and that finally makes it sometimes really rough to be not in the picture, because 180 degree is pretty wide. And when you say I can go always behind the camera, then have a look, you cast shadow. And this is the way I would suggest to set up a tripod. So the second leg casts a shadow on this leg here, and you can do this also just wrong, like this. And then you have 3 legs in shadow, which means when you want to have this all out of the picture, you have to work on 3 legs instead of 2. And that's maybe not funny to do this again and again and again. You get my point. Okay, so that's the setup. Let's have a look to the pictures itself that I have created from that shooting. I could have done a little bit more here, and I had already here 9 exposures, which is a lot of material finally, but 1 stop below would be nice. I didn't want to go here higher because f8 is my sweet spot, and to just put another ND on top of this is normally not my taste. It always changes a little bit the color, even if the name says neutral density. It's critical, but I could have exposed here maybe 1/8000th, so half the light, that would have worked. So that would be my first suggestion, and then I go here up, 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 and then on the last one I have some details here. It's not completely blown out. So some people suggest go higher, that everything is completely white, and go lower to have everything completely black. You don't gain so much dynamic with this, because in the last one there's nearly nothing left and it fades a little bit out already. But if you have really the information when it gets black, then the camera, or more the application that finally puts all together, knows exactly where the limit is, for example. So same happens here. It was all already pretty black, even the sun was not really there. But in the bright one I have some details left, and don't bother here with this histogram, because we have on outside of the circle a lot of light inside. It's typical, and I want to go maybe here to one mistake, and I hope I find this on the run here. So here we have some mistakes. Shadow of me in the picture, and I said 180 degree is sometimes tricky. I normally do not underestimate this. What I did here mainly wrong was to wear a white shirt. I do this on purpose when I want to demonstrate what can go wrong. I have shown you the 3 legs. 2 legs would be sufficient to have shadows with. And yeah, B in the picture is normally the most biggest mistake. Okay, as long as you can see the lens, you are not safe. That's my rule of thumb when I have people working with me, and that's the easiest way. As long as they can see glass, they are not on the right position. Just that simple. I should listen on my own words. Anyway, we will stitch this to an HDRI, and we will stitch this to a little 360-180, of course, in this series. But please check out the panorama course, because I give way more tips to do all this. It's not really an HDRI theme. The panorama theme will discuss this more in detail. And last but not least, have you noticed we have no gray cut here in it? I will talk about this in the next episode.